On Father's Day, my son handed his father-in-law a $16,000 guided bear hunt in northern British Columbia and handed me a crumpled Lotto Max ticket he probably found in his jacket pocket on the drive over. He tossed it across the picnic table in front of 24 people. It bounced off a chip bowl and landed next to my iced tea. Everyone laughed. Not quiet, polite laughter, the real kind, where people's shoulders shake. I'm Wade Holloway, 63 years old, retired master electrician, 35 years with IBW Local 303 out of Barrie. I spent those years running wire through walls other people lived in, climbing into attics in January to fix panels in houses bigger than mine, doing work that kept the lights on for this whole city. Decent pension. CPP, OAS since last spring. I'm not a rich man, but I never needed to be. My wife Donna passed from pancreatic cancer 6 years ago. Quick and brutal, like they always say it is. We'd been married 31 years. After she died, the house felt different. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls, same crack above the kitchen window I kept meaning to fix, but different. I rattled around in it for a while. Then I started rattling less. That's about the best I can explain it. We raised 2 kids in that house. My son is 35 now. He moved to Toronto after university, got into real estate development, the kind where you take old industrial land and turn it into condos with names like the Metropolitan and Vantage South. He wears suits that cost more than my monthly hydro bill. His wife Sloan is 33, works in marketing, grew up in Oakville. They live in a house in Etobicoke that they tell people is in the Junction, which apparently matters to the kind of people they know. My daughter Lena is 30. She teaches kindergarten at a school 2 kilometers from where she grew up. She drives a used Civic, brings me soup when I have a cold, and calls me every Sunday night without fail. She has Donna's laugh, the kind that starts in her shoulders before it reaches her face. Sloane's father, Vance Merritt, is 61 years old and owns a commercial real estate development company out of Mississauga. He built his money the patient way, bought properties nobody wanted in the 90s, held them, sold them when the GTA sprawled outward, like it always does. He has a lake house on Georgian Bay, 50 feet of private dock, and a boat he calls the Dividend. I'm not making that up. The Father's Day gathering was at Vance's place, 3 hours north of the city on a Friday evening, which for people who work downtown means they arrive slightly wound up from the drive. I got there Saturday at noon. Lena had found a rental cottage 40 minutes down the shore, because neither of us had been invited to stay at the lake house itself. The back deck runs the full length of the building, looks straight out over the water. Georgian Bay in June is still and dark blue before the motorboats come out. By 2 in the afternoon, there were 24 people on that deck. Sloane's aunts and cousins, a couple of my son's business partners from the city, Vance's neighbors from down the shore. The kind of gathering where everyone seems to know each other's net worth and nobody says so out loud. I sat at the far end of the main table. Lena was beside me, close enough that I could feel her trying not to look anxious on my behalf. Vance gave a toast. He's good at toasts. The kind of man who's had enough dinners to know exactly how long to pause, where to drop the sentiment in before people start checking their phones. He raised his glass to family, to gratitude, to the men who showed us what it means to build something. Then my son stood up. He pulled an envelope from inside his blazer and handed it to Vance with both hands, the way you hand something precious to someone. Sloane was watching, beaming. Vance opened it slowly, held it so people nearby could see. A printed itinerary. 7 days in northern BC. Fly into a private hunting camp near Dease Lake. Guides, licenses, full outfitter package. Bear and moose. Business class to Vancouver and back. You always said you wanted to go, my son said. Vance looked like he might actually cry. He stood and hugged my son the way men his age hug other men's sons when they can't quite bring themselves to say what they mean. 16,000, someone near me murmured. Canadian. The applause lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then my son turned toward me. Oh, he said, like he'd just remembered something left in the car. He patted his jacket pocket, fished around, pulled out a crumpled ticket. He looked at it for half a second. Then he flicked it across the table, with his thumb and forefinger the way you'd flick a bottle cap across a bar. Lotto Max, he said, Dad's a lucky guy. The laughter started before the ticket stopped sliding. I picked it up. The paper was warm from being in his pocket. The numbers were printed clean, but the edges were bent, the corners soft. It was the kind of ticket you buy at the Petro-Canada checkout, while you're waiting for the person ahead of you to finish, and then drop in your cup holder and forget about entirely. $5. I looked up the table. Lena wasn't laughing. She was watching me with the expression I recognized from when she was 9 years old and witnessed something unfair and was deciding whether to say so. I folded the ticket and put it in my shirt pocket. "Thanks," I said. Conversation moved on. Someone asked Vance about the outfitter's reputation. Someone else asked about the weather up near the BC border in July. I sat at the end of that long table and watched my son lean back in his chair with one arm around his wife. Easy and comfortable, the same posture he'd had since he was 19 and thought he already understood how everything worked. That evening, back at the rental cottage, Lena sat across from me at a small kitchen table, 2 cups of tea between us. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. She didn't push it. She's learned, over the years, that I mean it differently than it sounds. 3 years ago, Lena was driving home from a professional development day when a pickup truck ran a red light on Essa Road and hit the driver's side of her Civic at 60 kilometers an hour. The 911 call came in at 4:17 on a Tuesday afternoon. I found out at 4:49 when a paramedic called from Lena's unlocked phone. She spent 11 days at Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre in Barrie. 2 surgeries in the first week, broken pelvis, 2 fractured vertebrae, internal bleeding they got under control within the first 6 hours. OHIP covered all of it. In this country, you don't go bankrupt for getting hit by a truck. You just go broke in the quieter ways that follow. What OHIP doesn't cover: 22 months of private physiotherapy after the acute phase ends, the psychologist she needed twice a week for a year because she couldn't drive through an intersection without her hands shaking, 3 months at a private rehabilitation clinic in Collingwood, $12,000 for the stay alone. Prescription medications her basic work benefits had stopped covering when she went on leave and her plan lapsed. I added it up one night at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a calculator. $78,000. I went to TD first. My loan officer was kind, careful, and clear. My pension income wasn't the problem, it was the house. Donna had died without a formal will. The estate was tied up in probate, which in Ontario can drag on for a year or more depending on the court backlog, until probate cleared and the house formally transferred into my name alone. I couldn't borrow against it. The bank's hands were tied. Same answer at RBC. Same at Scotiabank. The woman at Scotiabank gave me a pamphlet about credit counseling and apologized twice. My son called 2 weeks after my 3rd bank appointment. He'd heard from Lena, who'd heard it through a family friend. "Let me help," he said. "Family loan, we sorted out between us." I should have asked more questions. I was 61 years old. My daughter needed $78,000. I'd been turned away by every institution I'd tried, and the collection notices from the rehabilitation facility were starting to arrive in batches. I drove to his office in Etobicoke, glass tower, parking that cost $14 for an hour. He had a folder on the desk, tabs already marked for signatures. He told me the rate was a family rate, and that we'd sort out the details later. He said not to worry. I signed. I didn't read page 4. I didn't read the amortization schedule. I signed because he was my son, and because I was drowning, and he was offering me a rope. The transfer came through the next morning. I slept 8 hours that night for the first time in months. 2 months later, when the first payment notice arrived, I sat down and read the full contract. 38% annual interest, compounding monthly. Collateral: the house at 14 Fernwood Crescent, Barrie, to be registered as security once probate concluded and title transferred into my name. I called him. "That rate. Private lending carries risk," he said. 3 banks said no to you. What rate were you expecting? I'm your father. And I lent you $78,000 with no collateral when no institution in the country would touch you. You want it called in? 30 days notice. Full balance. It's in the contract. He hung up before I could answer. I paid $2,800 a month after that. My pension, CPP, and OAS came to just over $4,000 a month. After the payment, I had $800 for everything else. Groceries, hydro property tax, gas for the truck. I stopped going to the Legion on Fridays. I canceled the cable package and kept the internet. I ate a lot of oatmeal and canned soup and told Lena I was eating fine whenever she asked. According to the amortization schedule, I finally understood fully 18 months in. At $2,800 a month, I was paying almost entirely interest. I had already put back over $50,000 and still owed nearly the full amount. 4 days after Father's Day, on a Wednesday evening, I was at my workbench in the basement sorting through a box of mail I'd let pile up, and I found a manila folder that wasn't mine. It was labeled Holloway Capital Corp. Active Files. I assumed my son had left it there the last time he'd stopped in to pick up some old documents. I opened it expecting tax paperwork. Inside were 8 loan agreements, different names, different amounts. People I recognized, the persons from 2 streets over, $42,000 at 36% APR. Cindy Bastedo, who'd owned the flower shop on Dunlop for 15 years, $31,000 at 38%. A retired school teacher named Dowd, $55,000 at 40%. 5 more families after that, all of them with collateral clauses, all of them with the same compounding structure as mine. I sat on a stool at that workbench for a long time. Then I got out my phone and photographed every page. When I was done, I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it and went upstairs and made a cup of tea and didn't say a word to anyone for 3 days. On the 4th day, I called my sister Fern. She drove over that afternoon. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, same spot Donna always sat, and she looked at the photographs on my phone without speaking for several minutes. When she set the phone down, her hands were unsteady. "There's something else," she said. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for months." She'd been at her own place when my son stopped by in April to use her printer. He'd left his phone face up on her counter while he was in the other room. A message had come through from someone she didn't recognize. She'd glanced at it, then couldn't stop reading. She showed me the screenshots she'd taken. Conversations going back 6 months, hotel reservations, plans made and kept and made again. And near the top of the scroll, a message from 3 months ago. "Once probate wraps and the old man's 6 months behind, the house is ours. Sloan still thinks she's getting it eventually anyway. Let her think that." I read it twice. Then I set Fern's phone on the table and looked out the kitchen window at the maple in the backyard. "I should have told you sooner," Fern said. Her voice broke on the last word. "You're telling me now," I said. "That's what matters." On a Thursday evening, Lena called. "Did you check the ticket?" she said, with a very specific patience in her voice that meant she'd been waiting to ask this for days. "It's a $5 quick pick." "Dad." I got up from the couch. My jacket was hanging on the hook by the door. The ticket was still in the breast pocket right where I'd put it on Father's Day. I opened my laptop, pulled up the Lotto Max results page, set the ticket flat on the counter. Winning numbers for that Friday's draw: 03, 14, 22, 31, 44, 49, 07. First number on my ticket: 03, match. Second, 14, match. Something shifted in my chest, the way a gear catches somewhere it hasn't caught before. Third, 22, match. Fourth, 31, match. Fifth, 44, match. Sixth, 49, match. Seventh, 07. Match. All 7. In Canada, lottery winnings are not taxed as income, not a dollar of it. Whatever the prize was, it was mine to keep in full. I opened 2 more tabs, 3 more. The numbers were the same everywhere. Jackpot, $55 million. I set the phone face down on the counter. I could hear Lena's voice, small and distant through the speaker, calling my name. I couldn't answer. I sat down on the kitchen floor, not dramatically, just because my legs had made that decision without consulting me, and I looked at a crumpled piece of paper my son had flicked across a picnic table 8 days ago as a punchline. I sat there for a while. When I finally called Lena back, I just said, "Can you come over?" She was there in 20 minutes. We sat at the kitchen table with the ticket between us and 2 cups of tea going cold. She cried before I finished explaining. Not sad crying, the other kind. "He flicked it," she said, "like a bottle cap." "I know." She reached across and held my hand, and neither of us said anything for a long time. Then, what are you going to do, Dad? My old IBW colleague Sean Kowalczyk had been a journeyman in the local for 12 years before he went back to school at 38 and got his law degree. We'd worked together on a hospital expansion in 2001. He still had the handshake of someone who'd pulled wire for a living. He practiced out of a small office on Dunlop Street East, 10 minutes from my house. I met him the next morning with printed photographs of all 9 loan agreements. He read through them for 20 minutes without a word. Then he took off his reading glasses. Wade, the 2024 federal amendment set the criminal interest threshold at 35% effective annual rate under Section 347 of the Criminal Code. Every contract you've shown me exceeds that, including yours. He tapped the stack. The loan is void, not voidable. Void from the beginning. His security interest in your house is legally unenforceable. I had paid $2,800 a month for 22 months. Over $61,000 on a loan that was never legal to begin with. And the others? The 8 families? If there's a documented pattern, and there clearly is, this becomes a criminal matter, not just civil. We file with the Ontario Ministry of Consumer Services and refer the evidence to police. 3 days later, I sat with a financial advisor. Sean recommended and incorporated a numbered company, 2847693 Ontario Inc. In Ontario, lottery prizes can be claimed through a corporation. The process was straightforward. The registration was quiet. I drove to the OLG Prize Center in Toronto the following week, wearing the same jacket I'd had on at Father's Day dinner. I don't know exactly why. It felt right. The day after the claim was processed, I filed the criminal complaint about my son's lending operation. Sean submitted the full documentation package, all 9 contracts, the photographs, the complete paper trail. 10 days after Father's Day, I sent one text to the family group chat Donna had created years ago, back when she thought a group chat might be one more way to hold us together. Video call, Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Everyone needs to be on. My son replied within 2 minutes, "Everything okay?" Sloan, "We'll be there." A message came through hours later from Vance, forwarded by my son. "We'll make it work with the time difference." Saturday night. The hunting lodge was 6 hours behind us, which meant Vance and my son were on my screen at 2 in the afternoon their time, sitting in a wooden building with antler mounts on the wall behind them, both of them with beer. They looked relaxed. Vance had caught some sun already. My son was wearing a flannel shirt he'd never have worn in Etobicoke. Sloan was in their living room at home, on the gray couch. I'd helped them carry up 3 flights of stairs 3 years ago. I was at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed that loan agreement, without reading it. "You sounded serious in the message," my son said. "What's going on?" "I want to show you something," I said, starting with this. I shared my screen. His loan agreement appeared, his company letterhead, my signature on page 3, every line of fine print I'd been too desperate to read. His posture shifted, just slightly. Sloan leaned toward her camera. "What is this? What loan?" I told her everything. Lena's accident, the 3 banks, his offer, the rate I'd been paying for 22 months. I scrolled through the contract slowly, reading the relevant clauses aloud. 38%. Monthly compounding, the security clause against the house. 38%, Sloan said. Her voice had gone very quiet. Under the amended criminal code, the criminal interest threshold is 35%, I said. The loan is void. Vance set his beer down somewhere off screen. "What is she saying, Trent?" "It's a private arrangement." "It's illegal," I said. "That's not my opinion. That's the statute." I moved to the next document on the screen. 8 contracts. I scrolled through them and read the names and amounts aloud. The Pearsons, Cindy Bastedo, Don Dowd, 5 more families after that. All of them people who'd run out of options and found someone who offered to help. Sloan stood up from the couch. "I know the Pearsons," she said slowly. "Marion Pearson has been in my book club for 2 years. She told me in January they might lose their house." She stopped. She looked at her husband through the screen. "Trent." "Ash, Sloan." "Marion Pearson is in my book club," she said again. Not loudly. The way you repeat something when you need to hear it a second time before you can believe it. Vance's face on the screen had gone very still. "How many people altogether?" 8 that I've documented. The complaint filed this week lists all 8. I expect more will come forward. I paused. There's one more thing I want to show you. I moved to the screenshot. The conversation Fern had sent me after quietly asking a mutual friend who knew more than most. My son used the same phone for everything, and he'd been less careful than he should have been. I shared it on screen. Sloane read it. Her hand went to her mouth. She read it again. Hotel reservations, plans made and kept and made again. And then, near the top, from 3 months ago. Once probates, wraps and the old man's 6 months behind, the house is ours. Sloane thinks she's getting it eventually anyway. Let her think that. The room on my end was very quiet. Sloane lowered her hand from her mouth. She looked at the screen with an expression I recognized. The one people get when something they already half knew becomes something they can no longer avoid knowing. I want a divorce, she said. Not raised, not dramatic, just clear and final, the way practical people make practical decisions when they finally have all the information they need. Sloane, wait. I want a divorce. She said it a second time, the same way, and then she reached forward and closed her laptop. Her screen went dark. Vance was still on. He looked older than he had 60 seconds earlier. He took a slow breath. Trent, he said. You and I are going to have a conversation on the flight home that you are not going to enjoy. He looked at me across 2,000 kilometers of shield and mountains, and whatever else lies between Georgian Bay and Dease Lake. Wade, I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. He nodded once, then his screen went dark. Just the two of us now. My son in that lodge with the antler mounts behind him, daylight coming through the window, me at my kitchen table in Barrie. You destroyed everything, he said. No, I said. I found out what you built. That's different. He stared at me through the screen. He looked young, suddenly, not in a good way. One more thing, I said. The ticket you flicked across the table at Father's Day. The $5 Lotto Max quick pick from your cup holder. I let it sit for just a moment. All 7 numbers matched. $55 million. Tax-free in Canada. Another beat. I incorporated a numbered company and claimed it there 3 weeks ago. The transfer was confirmed last Tuesday. Your security interest in this house was never legal, and now it doesn't matter anyway. I watched his face try to find somewhere to go. Goodbye, I said. I clicked end call. The screen went black. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window I could see the maple in the backyard. Just a shape now against the dark sky. The same shape it's been for 35 years, growing a little taller each time I remember to look. My phone buzzed. Lena. How did it go? I typed back. Done. Her reply came in 4 seconds flat. Come for breakfast tomorrow. I'm making pancakes. The criminal complaint eventually grew to 19 families. Word moves through a mid-sized Ontario city the way it always has, through Tim's lineups and church basements and the waiting room at the walk-in on Bayfield. My son lost his real estate license pending the outcome of the investigation. The process took over a year to work through the system, the way these things do in this country, but it worked through. I set aside $3 million in a bursary fund at Georgian College. Trades students first. Electricians, plumbers, millwrights, the kids who were going to spend their working lives inside the walls of other people's buildings, doing the work that keeps everything running. The rest sits in managed accounts I barely think about. I still get my coffee at the Tim Hortons on Mapleview Drive. Double-double, the same order I've had since 1987. Lena paid off her car. She took a trip to Portugal with a friend from the hospital. She smiles when she talks about her students, which is most of the time. Her physiotherapy ended 14 months ago, and she drives through intersections now, without her hands shaking most days. Sloane finalized her divorce 8 months after the call. I heard through Fern that she'd gone back to school part-time and was renting an apartment in the annex. I hope she's all right. I think she will be. I haven't spoken to my son since the Saturday night call. I don't know if I will. Maybe someday, if enough years pass and enough things genuinely change. But I've stopped measuring my future against that question. My peace doesn't depend on his choices anymore. The house at 14 Fernwood Crescent is mine. It was always mine. The maple in the backyard is taller than the roofline, and the crack above the kitchen window is still there, and I still mean to fix it. The ticket is in a small frame on the mantel, still crumpled, still warm-looking, 7 numbers in ink that has faded a little at the edges. Fern comes over on Tuesday mornings. We drink coffee at the kitchen table and look out at the backyard, and mostly we don't need to say much. That's been enough for us our whole lives. I turned 64 in March. A few of my old IBB brothers came by, and we had steaks in the backyard, and someone brought a chocolate cake from the Costco on Mapleview, and it was a genuinely good evening. Lena gave a small toast. She said that I'd always told them, the work matters more than the wage, and that she thought I was right about that, but she was glad the numbers had come out the way they did. Everyone laughed, the kind where nobody's laughing at anyone. I thought about a crumpled piece of paper landing next to my iced tea on a dock in Georgian Bay, about how small a person can be made to feel by a single flick of someone's wrist, about the quiet drive home that evening, and the house waiting on Fernwood Crescent with its maple and its crack above the kitchen window, and its 31 years of everything that has ever mattered to me. My son thought he understood what I was worth. He was wrong about that. But he was the one who handed me the ticket that proved it. I don't know what to call that exactly. It isn't luck, not quite. It isn't justice, not quite that either. Something quieter than both of those words. The truth, maybe. Just the truth, doing what the truth eventually does.